welcome to SHOWstudio. We're going to be rounding up all of the fashion that we saw in Milan, but before we kick off talking about our menswear highlights from the Italian fashion capital, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, because I'm joined with a diverse and very talented set of boys to help me unpick Milan. But Alex, tell the world who you are.
I'm Alex Fury, I'm the fashion editor of The Independent.
I'm Carlo Brandelli and I'm the creative director for Kilgar.
I'm Tom Stubbs and I write the Sharpener column for the Financial Times How to Spend It.
Alex, I'm going to pick on you first because you're very comfortable talking on camera and like the sound of your own voice. When I emailed you about the panels, you were like, "Oh, I really want to do Milan. I really want to do Milan." Why was that?
I've never done Milan.
Is that the main reason?
But also I think sometimes Milan gets a bad rap as
Mainly.
it being kind of overly commercial, it being non-creative, that there aren't exciting things. And actually, I'm quite a fan of Milan. I like going to Milan Fashion Week. I do quite like that you know what you're going to get from certain labels, but I think it can still surprise you.
Yeah.
There's something that I think it occupies a very distinct place in the fashion sphere. And so I like to go there, and I think there are things that are worthy of debate.
Do you think the criticism's a bit lazy? Everyone will be like, "Oh, it's commercial, it's commercial."
Well, I sometimes wonder what they really mean by commercial, because ultimately isn't that kind of the point of the whole thing? It's like, I wonder if by commercial they mean that they feel it's watered down, or they feel that it's focused on a certain area of the market. And I think there is, in Milan, there are these labels that really kind of don't matter. That maybe you see more of them than you do in other capitals. You see kind of these sort of soupy suiting labels that really don't have any relevance to anyone else, but they sell a hell of a lot of product.
Yeah.
But then
so
at the same time,
what do you mean by relevance then?
What do you mean?
Well, when you say they don't have any relevance to anyone
They
else,
don't have any relevance in terms of a fashion
Right,
discussion, because really what they do doesn't change a great deal from season to season.
Sure.
But it sells a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
That's where that's where they sit. But at the same time, in terms of the fashion shows you see, in terms of the fashion points in Milan, there are people that are saying very distinct, very inventive things. And for me, you couldn't get two things that are more kind of, particularly this season, you couldn't get two labels that were more opposite than Prada and Versace.
Exactly.
But they show alongside each other on this schedule. So I think to say that Milan is all crass and it's all commercial is,
Do you think
is
they mean
inaccurate.
safe? Sorry, Alex, when they say commercial, these people that talk, is it this word safe?
I don't know, because because again, I don't think you could describe Versace as safe.
I think it's this idea of getting what you
imagination.
expect. People in fashion, they love to be surprised, don't they? So I think perhaps that's the
I think
biggest
bandy the word creativity around quite a lot, but it's one of the best things about fashion is on people, so it has to have a relevance. And I think creativity just gets said all the time. I'm not sure exactly what it means on a relevance level.
Yeah, and you used this word business as well when you were talking. So when did Milan get labelled as this business capital of design and fashion? 20 years ago, probably. Armani.
It was the rise of Italian ready-to-wear.
Yeah, it's two words, isn't it? It's commercial and
idea,
business.
And also, I think maybe it was when there was that rise of Italian ready-to-wear versus Paris. Then Paris, began to say, well, the Italians are good at business, but we're good at creativity.
But I would question
really
if that's true.
what
This idea of the big advertiser brands. There is as many of those in Paris now as there are in Milan.
Yeah, and London probably. And
But it comes from a very different place, I think, when Italian ready-to-wear started to emerge, and when these, what are now enormous Italian brands began to emerge in the 70s. They were backed by textile manufacturers, and they were the people that were bankrolling the business. So it emerged from a very different place than designers emerging in Paris, and certainly than designers emerging in London. So I think people saw it perhaps as a little bit more cynical, that people were emerging more from a business background and were more interested in making money than they were in saying something creative.
I understand, because obviously I'm Italian. And this word business and commercial, whatever you want to call it, it does have those things. But I think it's because, and I've said this before in these panels, is there is a culture in fashion, especially in Italy, that they care about what they do. So they want to appear really, really conscientious and appear as if they're doing things in the right way. So they like to have one part be really professional and then the other part to be seen as creative or in some way groundbreaking. And maybe that's why you get this Well, actually, I don't know how Versace started to. Well, I do know how Versace started to look like Versace, but it's very, very Roman. But the difference between Versace looking the way it does this season and Prada looking the way it does, it is a perfect example of those two, the left and the right. You need the positive and the negative, which is Italy all over for the last 15 or 20 years.
But I think also there's that idea that just because something is creative doesn't mean it has to be anti-commercial, or it can't be creative in a commercial way. There was, I think Armani's a great example of that. When Armani emerged in the 70s, what he did actually, and we sort of gloss over this and people ignore it, the fact that what Armani did was so incredibly revolutionary in the 70s, when he deconstructed a suit and created a suit that was casual and rumpled and soft and was made in a way that a suit hadn't been made before.
Do you like Armani? Tom, you into Armani?
I am again now, after years of sitting through weirdness and sort of crocodile sort of Gabbana safari jackets, all of a sudden, last couple of seasons, Armani's looking clean, modern, little bit unfussy, streamlined, flattering.
Did he do a crocodile suit?
Mainly. No, crocodile safari or something like that.
Okay.
In teal.
Yeah,
Or stuff that rustled, or cubic trousers. That's finished for a bit, and then he's just going back to what he's good at. I don't know if he had a meeting with his people and said to his retinue, I think it's our time again. And he's sort of almost doing what he was doing in the late 70s, and it's looking damn good for straight up older blokes who want to look a bit smooth.
But it's interesting what Alex says about this idea of people gloss over Armani. I don't think it's so much that they gloss over it. I think there's a lot of lazy journalism or young stylists who they always want something new, so they don't get, you want Armani to be Armani. It wouldn't make sense if he wasn't doing that, what he was doing, which is why it's interesting that you say, you like it now, it makes sense in the context of what he did that was so impressive in the 70s, especially in the late 70s. But I think that's the issue, is that we get used to often being surprised each season. But in Italy, it doesn't make sense for Armani to not be Armani, and that doesn't make it any less revolutionary. It just had its time where it was very revolutionary.
Well, it's actually surprising that he's still doing what he's known for in this context, and how we live and how the world is and how business is. Alex said it earlier. He created this whole world. We spoke about before when he did his apprenticeship and he was the right-hand man to Nino Cerruti. So a lot of that feeling between Cerruti and Armani was very, very similar aesthetic. American Gigolo. We've spoken about that on this panel before, haven't we? Lou, I can't with you. And again, who was responsible for the Gigolo look? It was Armani, but his skills were honed at Cerruti. That was something that Cerruti was developing along with the colour palettes. So the fact that Armani has looked consistently a similar way for 20 years, with a few blips, 25 years even, is actually quite impressive. If there's one colour you associate with Armani, it would be...
Greige.
I'd say dark navy.
Oh, sorry.
Over a long time.
He invented greige though, didn't he?
Yeah, what does that mean exactly?
It's grey and beige.
Greige.
Yeah, it's very amusing. But I'd say dark navy. Next week, in 2 weeks' time, I go to Milan. I'm actually going to stay in the Armani hotel. And because I've kept my distance from Armani because they're from the same town as my family's from. So I've deliberately kept my distance, but I'm actually going to immerse myself in Armani land to see what happens.
But I feel like all of Milan is Armani land. I kind of love it when you go there. It's like you can't escape Armani. It's everywhere, and it's just
the airport. You arrive, it's there.
Yeah.
Airport Giorgio Armani. It's quite a thing, whether you like it or don't like it. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Diffusion line.
Of course, it's important for the business side, isn't it?
Alex, what's your take on current Armani?
I think with Armani, there is a degree that the name it's one of those names, and actually that's kind of the great thing about Italian fashion, the names resonate, and people don't really need to know what Armani's done every season because people understand what it stands for. And actually, he will never deviate very far away from that, because what that name stands for is ultimately what people come to buy from him. I don't think anyone's really going to go to Versace and buy a black jacket. That's not what they would go to Versace for, in the same way that people aren't going to go to Armani and buy, a leather thong. That's what they're going to go to Versace to buy.
Steady, Alex.
But, so I think there's that idea that Armani represents something in that kind of landscape of Italian fashion. The thing that I find really amazing about Armani is the breadth of that, is the amount of product that he creates, the amount that's created, and it's him. He's still the person that oversees it. He's the person that oversees the makeup. He's the person that oversees all the diffusion lines under his name. So there's this kind of completeness of vision, and lack of interference, which sometimes can be a bad thing, because it can feel stilted and it can feel in a bit of a time warp. but I kind of think that there's an authenticity to it. That, you know, there's a genuineness to what he's doing.
Did you see the show this year, Alex?
I saw
Live.
Emporio, I didn't see Giorgio.
That's
but I
Emporio,
did
right?
see-
This is
Emporio.
Emporio that we're looking
But
at.
I
yeah.
did see
Got any
Privé
Giorgio?
as well. I mean, the thing that I like about Armani for menswear as well is I think menswear is what he's really good at. I think his best women's wear is when he dresses women like men. You know, the
Which
trouble,
is again what he revolutionised.
yeah,
and what
exactly.
he was
It's
known
this
for,
whole
so-
idea, you know, and that's very much the root of it. I think, you know, when you see the women's wear, it's interesting to look at the women's wear and see the focus on day wear and the fact that the day wear always looks fantastic. So really, I like it with a lot of these houses, with a lot of Italian houses. I like it when they're very true to what they are. I like it when Versace is very Versace. I like it when Armani is very Armani. I think that's when they function the best, is actually when they're kind of reiterating what they're about. And this season, I really felt like that's what Milan was about.
But that's
Prada
inter-
said that
yeah.
Prada was Prada Classics with a large C. And this idea of honing what Prada represents.
You're just talking about Milan, aren't you, Alex? When you
I
say
think-
you like, that's what you like about the great identities of these designers when they actually do themselves.
It's
Well, I
interesting
think in Milan this season it was very striking that
But
it
that's other
really felt
people's
like it was about
biggest
people
insult.
iterating what they do.
I'd see that as
Yeah.
safe, and you know, I wanted to not look at too much. In fact, I didn't look at anything at all, so I could just comment fresh today. What was I going to say?
I don't
What was I
know.
going to say, Lou? What was the comment?
We were talking about
You said you felt it was
Not
safe,
just
I
Milan.
think.
Armani,
yeah,
not
you
just
said
Milan.
safe.
Did you feel it's safe?
Oh, safety, yeah. Yeah, maybe that's perhaps a little bit safe. In these uncertain times, people just fall back and do what they're known for. And the comment, was it off camera we were speaking about, you were looking for designers to actually present something new or come up with a new proposition or move forward, as opposed to everyone seems to be moving in Milan into this safe area, which maybe is the classic looks and designs that they're used to doing. I don't know, I didn't see the show.
I don't
But
want to
I'm-
go to Fendi and get something a bit old and looks a little bit sort of
so
Glastonbury
you want something
convoy.
contemporary as well?
Yeah, well, contemporary, but I want it to look a bit like Fendi because, like, you know, I don't want it to look sort of squat punk.
Well, I think there's
And
that
that's that.
idea of newness and of kind of restating your aesthetic. I think there
Yeah.
is, you know, there is innovation within the realm of what you do. You know, I hate going there and feeling that I'm seeing something else. You know, going to a label and feeling like they're trying to do Saint Laurent or something
So
like
what,
that.
what did you
is-
think of Bottega, which was incredibly... that didn't feel like Bottega doing Bottega, that felt like Bottega doing...
Is this Bottega now on screen?
Yeah.
But it didn't. No, it didn't feel like Bottega doing Bottega. It felt like Bottega doing Ballet, which that is what I liked about it. I liked that it actually was within this kind of this realm that they've built for themselves, which is this idea of kind of luxury, this idea of a kind of luxurious nonchalance, which I think there was in this idea of something that's undone that doesn't feel like it's trying very hard.
Did you say Bottega doing ballet?
Well, it's ballet. It's
Yeah.
you
you mean
know.
ballet de danse,
Yeah.
as
You-
opposed to
I mean,
ballet
if you
the
look at
Swiss
this-
shoe brand.
The first thing I looked at this and saw was it's, you know, Avedon pictures of off-duty Nureyev. That's just what it is.
Yeah,
Like,
strong
it
on the
was-
left-hand side, the guy with the white.
But literally
t-shirt.
that's, you know, what the whole show was about.
But I don't think it was as simple as it being about ballet and it being about certain inspirations. I also think this was definitely a reference to the way men dress and the sportier looks that we're seeing elsewhere.
And track pants
Definitely.
and shorts, loads of those.
I
Did you see
agree.
the show, Tom?
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah.
But
I
then
don't always
Bottega's
like
done
Bottega.
this before. It's like it's not, you know, it's not like it's Bottega doing a spin on what other people are doing. I would argue that Bottega's one of the labels that has been doing this for the best.
What is Bottega 2014? Because in my mind, all I know Bottega for really is leather, and that woven leather in detail.
I
It's
think there's
predominantly
that.
where it's
But
in
I
my
think
mind.
now it's become a label that is about luxury. It's one of the most profitable labels in Kering's stable. There were two labels that posted a profit last year, or that posted a large profit, and those at Kering, and that was Yves Saint Laurent
And Bottega.
and Bottega.
It's very wearable as I'm looking at it now.
But I think as well, so obviously it's appealing to men, and there is an appeal to men in a certain way.
With the exception of the end.
That's what I suggested we wear.
Yeah, ballet's interesting because I married an ex-ballerina, so I understand the codes and the ideas. But when you pointed it out, Alex, because obviously I didn't see the show, I didn't read about it. That kind of rolled up on the leg. But are they referencing that from a sporty, athletic standpoint, or is it something else? Is it more feminine because a lot of femininity's crept into menswear?
Well,
I
There's a
think
lot of-
it's sorry.
Go
Nance.
on.
I think it's sort of luxe slouch. It's really expensive way to look slouchy, and there's loads of people right around this area as well. You know, sort of rich West London that are buying that. You know, like, you know, globally they love us really expensive £500 track pan, and that's what it's talking
But that
about.
would suggest then, which kind of differs from what Alex was saying, that this is a response to the times in a way.
Well, it's managed to cleverly do both. He's done something creative and
Well, fashion's always a response to the times. You can never just be doing, you can never just do something. It's always responding to some kind of outward stimuli. You're not up in an ivory tower.
But I felt
What if you're doing your classic looks?
Yeah.
But I think even then you try and give it a spin that makes it feel contemporary. You're not just going into your archive and pulling stuff out from your archive. And even if you are, there is a conscious curation of that. There is a feel of, this is the jacket that feels right for now. And it's weird to say, why do you see ballet? Where's that coming from? There was Rick Owens was ballet themed.
No, it's very clear.
We shot
Dries
ballet
Van-
dancers in Dries Van
Dries Van
Noten. We
Noten.
shot ballet dancers in January. Someone else told me they loved this collection because they just shot a ballet story that looked just like this.
Why is it coming through now? In
Don't
the
know.
last 2-3
That's
seasons?
the other thing. Why is that? But it's not. It's within the last 6 months that all this is focused.
Why in the
around.
last 6 months? Because men.
But that's it. It's the idea of something that just feels right at the moment. And I don't think there's something
faded and faded jersey.
I don't think there's something that necessarily explains it. It's not like there's a big ballet exhibition or anything like that. But there are all these things. And there are stylists that work with all these designers and that interact with each other. And
There's a
they're
well-known
shooting.
stylist that went out with a well-known ballet dancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I can mention that. I'll tell you off camera later. Well, I know, because obviously with my connection to ballet, I've seen a lot of ballet and I've seen a lot of men that were ballet dancers. And this slouchy, relaxed look is a response to ballerinas wanting to look a particular way when they're dancing for auditions. Essentially, and being as comfortable as possible. And those brands that, there are actually brands, big companies that sprung up from that ballet feel. Sorry, we're going off subject a little bit, Lou. Just pull me back in when you need. Pineapple, for example, which was a great explosion. And I think it was Reed of London as well, and Frank that did the shoes. And I remember McQueen's last collection, or the collection before his last collection, before he died, he did a very high-heeled shoe with it squared off as a ballerina pump, which I think is the best shoe I've ever seen, one of the best shoes I've ever seen. So it was there, and I just wondered why in these last 6
I'm
or 7
intrigued as
months
to why.
it
But
came
you
through
could
so
see it from
strongly.
2 ways. You could see it from what Tom was saying, is it's about relaxation and slouch, and these are the kind of clothes, as you said, that men will probably wear in a very casual way. Or you can see it in literally the polar opposite way, is it's about poise and athleticism and...
I think also it's athleticism. Everyone did athleticism last summer. This is a new way to do that. There's also that idea of, we did that last year, so let's do something different.
Yeah, the core idea of ballet is strength, poise, balance, and to make it as beautiful as possible. So there's a strong ethos about.
I think it's
how
about
they do it.
luxury. I wrote about this at the time, but
For here.
No, across the board with Dries and with this as well. I think it's about, everyone's always like, what is luxury now? What is luxury now? And I think everything feels very accessible at the moment, and fashion feels very democratic. And something that isn't accessible and isn't easy to acquire, no matter how much money you have, is an athletic body or technique. And I think there's something very luxurious about that. And I think with ballet, no one can just be a ballet dancer. You can't just buy that. And I think there's something quite interesting.
You have to put the
about
time
that.
in.
Exactly. And
Well,
that
time
is
is luxury, isn't it?
Time, putting commitment to something. And I think for me, that's why it felt very right. It's kind of a slow fashion idea. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah. Nureyev was in, wasn't he in Not the Devil Wears Prada? He was in one of those shows.
No, Baryshnikov was in.
Baryshnikov was
Sex
in
and the City.
Sex and the City, and he looked
I
fantastic.
love that you got that straight.
I think I referenced that about this show.
I had to grapple with that one. That's right. Baryshnikov was in Sex and the City, and he looked fantastic. There was a masculinity, but there was also a relaxed composure about these dancers because they are so confident. I think that comes through really strongly in. Is this Bottega?
Bottega. Did you like Bottega, Tom?
Yeah, a lot. It's not always my thing, but the last 2 seasons I've been into it, understood it, as it were. They've abandoned tailoring almost completely, and they're just doing sort of luxury basics that people fancy. You've got to be in shape for that stuff, though, mind you. That will try to be, because it can look quite crass if you've got a bit of a derby on you, and you do see it.
We might need these translations, Tom.
I think that they can Twitter that. Google it and Twitter.
But I think the other thing with this is it's actually, when you deconstruct
There's some
it,
tailoring.
a lot of it
It's
is
pretty bad.
a lot of it is down to the styling of it.
That's-
It's styling
Yeah.
to give it a very cohesive message, but you roll the trouser legs
But you're
down. It's not
talking
like
ab-
everything's 3/4
You're
length.
talking about profit at Kering. It wasn't. Katie styled this, Katie Grand, right? And didn't it, when her and Giles got hold of it, sprayed it neon pink and blue on
Yeah.
white, went mad for a season or two, and they like took it off them. Tom Ford bought it, didn't it? And then,
it was LVMH, and then it got bought by Gucci, and they changed the. I mean, I think the whole idea then was they wanted to jolt it and make it into a Prada, in that they wanted to take an accessories house and give it a fashion edge. And then when Gucci Group brought it, it was to take it from that and make it into an Italian Hermes. So it was this kind of, which again is something very interesting, looking at the different directions people want
she's
to.
back on the phone giving it a bit of slouch.
But again, it's in that luxurious way. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's been given like a massive fashion jolt.
I don't think it was given a fashion jolt at all.
And it's not going to scare the horses. I think there's that. There, in the same way that people might get scared by a 3/4 leg trouser, but actually it's just been rolled up. You roll it down. It's going to translate very easily to an existing customer. It's not something that's too aggressively fashionable. And I don't think that's what somebody who's buying Bottega Veneta wants. They don't want things that are aggressively fashionable.
Well, it's labelled as luxury, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
So, that's not really to do with fashion.
We could talk about Versace now.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about
aggressive fashion.
That's not that aggressive.
My
Let's
favourite.
scroll upwards.
The
and then
music was brilliant as well. They had-
Is David
Bradshaw.
still doing this?
They had like a really didn't they have like a samba version of not We Are the Robots, but something by Kraftwerk? Yeah,
No,
what
it was
it?
Yeah.
it was Showroom Dummies.
We Are
to
Showroom
open it.
Dummies.
It was
We Are the Robots then? No?
It's
No, Showroom Dummies.
Showroom
Was it?
Dummies.
Yeah.
That was good.
But it's
But I thought it's so apt. I said this because it's so apt for Versace showroom dummy, because her men, they just look like these kind of blow up sex dolls.
But as well, I
Yeah,
think
but did they
it
just
was-
play the track, or did they put acid?
No, they did a Latin
samba.
version.
it was
of-
it was all remixed versions of
You
80s
barely hear it.
music.
It's good.
It's one of the only things you shouldn't really tamper with is Kraftwerk.
It
No,
was
it was good
remixed versions of but also I was like remixed versions of 80s
Everyone loved it
music,
as well.
remixed versions of 80s fashion. It all felt very kind of apt.
Shame we can't hear it.
Why do you love Versace so much?
It's got a point of view and it's not afraid. It's got bollocks.
Do you wear it, Alex?
No, I don't.
Why?
Because to like something, I don't have to wear it. I like Dior Couture. I don't wear Dior Couture. I look at frocks. I don't wear frocks
Always.
most
That'd
of
be
the time.
I'd be interested to see which pieces you would pick from Versace.
But you don't look at collections like that, though, do you?
No, not really. I
No.
mean, sometimes I'll look at it and be like, and with this actually, there were moments when it came out and I was like, I really like the shoes.
jumpsuit.
Is that all in one jumpsuit?
There's more jumpsuits that are better
Lots
still.
of jumpsuits. But I like the shoes, I like the bags, I like the porcelain. I like, there are moments where you're like, oh, I like this and I would like to own this, but that's not my driving force for a collection. I don't look at a collection and judge it on whether or not I
You're
would
not
wear it.
shopping,
I think it's really facile for a journalist to look at something and be like, well, I could wear this.
Well, that basically means I couldn't be a menswear reporter because.
But,
You're allowed to do it, aren't you?
You could, but.
Occasionally.
Well, yeah, I know. I think it's all right to think and be like, but ultimately, it's kind of like, is it convincing? As a vision, is this
Yeah.
convincing? It's
Right.
not even could I imagine somebody wearing it? It's would I like to see someone wearing it? Would I like to see people looking like this? And they're going to scroll up in a minute and show a man wrapped in a toga bedsheet. But I like that it's got this. It's really uncompromising. And I think having
You like the strength in the design.
I just like that it's. I talked with Donatella about it a few times, and she said, at one point she said that she was backstage and they were sending the show out, and she was like, I hate this, I hate this show, and it was like, it's backstage, it's at the show, you have to send it out, and now she feels like she's brought it back to what she really wants it to be, and also I feel like. Going back to what I said about, people aren't going to buy plain things from Versace, they're going to buy this. The profits are up 46%. There's this kind of amazing reaction to what they're doing. Oh no, sorry, it's now 46% of the business of the house, and I think the profits were up about 25%.
That might reflect a bit of a change in people's moods anyway. People are feeling
Yeah.
a little bit more like.
But I think also the
gold.
fact that now it's almost half of what they're selling at the house. There's this, and they've had this
Does that include
injection
the
of
interiors and
capital.
the homeware and all that area?
Well, that was what
Yeah, I
was
think it
inter-
includes the whole thing.
that was what was interesting with the show, is it was about Versace as a vision. You can kind of see
It's
in
a
the
plate
background.
in the background. isn't
Well,
it?
they came out holding plates.
Some
As
of them were
Alex said,
holding
they're wrapped in
plates.
Versace bed linen.
Yeah.
It's a,
The prints were, the only print is based on plates. It's like plates and tassels, you see it there on the right hand
Versace
side.
towels.
The thing is, it's so obvious because
But it's men without ties, that's kind of what you want it to be.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
it's going back to And that's another thing. I think it's not so much what you expect, but it's what you want. This is what I want Versace to be. I want Versace to be kind of love it or leave it, you know, and to have that sense of kind of
we don't want to
sexuality and obvious sexuality and a certain vulgarity. I think really that's what it's always stood for, and it's kind of doing all of that with a huge sense of humour, with your tongue in your cheek, and doing something that's very strong and forceful. And I don't think you could deny that this is very strong and forceful. But on the flip side, it's beautifully made. Like that's macrame. And they had macrame.
When you say that, Alex, you mean which
the look in the middle?
Yeah, the middle.
It's macrame.
Is that a blanket over his shoulder?
It's a towel.
Towel.
I think.
Okay.
Versace
and
towel.
what's the definitive motif of Versace? Because it looks like a Palladio print to me. Does anyone know?
It's the Medusa. It's the Greek
Medusa.
logo. It's that kind of classicism, which, you know, and you have people wrapped in togas. But also, I think it's that combined with
which was
that
Roman
sexuality.
as well. Which was Roman as well. I've never owned a bit, and it's not for me. But the only thing I do have from Versace is a vase which was made in Venice by Seguso, who was really one of the greatest glass artists. And it's multicoloured stripes, and they did them in the store about 15 years ago. And I walked in, and these vases were just incredible. And it's one of these classic designs that you get from Murano. He didn't use, at that time with the vases, they didn't use the Medusa motif or any of those Roman ideas. They just used colour in a very particular way, and it was really, really strong. I didn't think I'd like it, but actually when I saw it, it was really quite a powerful thing. Done in the best possible way with the best craftsmen.
But that's kind of what Alex,
Yes,
But I think that's what this is, you know, that's more of the macrame in the middle, and it's a Havana street scene worked into something in macrame.
I'm really interested by something Tom said. We were talking about why the profits are up, and you said, oh, is it something to do about, you know, the mood of the times? And I think it's interesting, especially because we did our London run-up this morning, we were talking a bit about people like Astrid Anderson, and this idea that men feel more comfortable being sexy now. And I wonder if you guys would agree with that, and maybe you think that's tying into why Versace feels right again. Is that men, it's not just about dressing to feel appropriate or to feel masculine or to feel smart. It's about dressing to look, to look sexy in the way that, you know, women have traditionally got dressed to feel sexy,
So it's
or been encouraged to.
More about ostentation really than feeling sexy.
Do you
Possibly. In this case, yeah.
I think it's different markets for luxury and different people that are, you know, it's like Astrid said, her fur sells the best in Los Angeles and in the Middle East. The two places that have the hottest climates and where you think fur would sell the least. And, you know, Versace sells really well in the Middle East. I think it's these kind of new ideas of luxury, and people that aren't, you know, there was that period when people shied away from wearing anything that was ostentatious. And I think now that the luxury market is fragmented so much, there will always be certain markets, you know, it's Brazilian girls that are ordering Versace couture. And they obviously want something very different to Dior couture. But that's what they're coming for, and it's the same way that there are, you know, Middle Eastern men are buying Versace and are buying Astrid Anderson fur. They want something very different, perhaps, to certain people in London. But then at the same time, you know, I think there are markets, and now the way that fashion is, there's no longer one silhouette, one suit, one way of dressing. It's fragmented, and you have this kind of diversity of
And it's interesting
luxury.
because it goes back to what we were saying about it's harder then to criticise certain things or to be frustrated when a house is exploring, you know, is doing something that feels very them, because there is, you know, Versace is the label to love, the right house in certain areas. And
I think one of the things that I find quite difficult to criticise is if a house is being very themselves. If a house is being very true to itself, then that's kind of what I want to see. I want a house that's being incredibly honest and incredibly true to what they do. It's when I see somebody that I feel is borrowing an identity from something else and is not doing what they really think is right, that's what I have an issue with. If I see something that's kind of pretending, as opposed to something that, you know, with this, it's so much how I would see Versace. It's so much how I would see a Versace, you know, this is, if Versace's doing a collection about Havana, this is what a Versace collection about Havana looks like.
Was there a theme to this show? Did you go to the show?
Havana.
It was
Yeah.
just Havana.
It was Havana, but I think there's kind of a multitude of, you know, when I wrote about it, I was saying it's interesting that they presented the porcelain, and then there's a lot of porcelain colours, you know, that's like rose pompadour, it's like Limoges porcelain colours almost. There's, you know, kind of china white. There was a blue at the start that was like bleu de roi that they used in Sèvres porcelain. I mean, maybe that's me being overly kind of...
Well, those colours...
But they're kind of 18th century colours.
They sort of own many of those colours, those sort of weird metallic lilacs and stuff. They're just their colours, their handwriting. It's great.
And this sand colour as well. There's that very famous Avedon shot of the guys and girls piled up from the early 80s.
Right.
Which I think is that.
Is that a big plate as the background in porcelain?
No, it was all different things tied to the wall. So there's
that is a
chairs
big
and
plate.
At the back?
That's
yeah.
like one plate there.
Yeah, okay.
But these are all chairs and plates and that kind of thing.
And what are those broken fragments of plate on the backdrop?
No, they're physical plates.
No, physical
No, what are those lines everywhere?
Ropes holding it all up.
Oh, ropes.
There was a bit of a panic at the end to get all the plates out because people do steal from Versace shows. It's sort of considered fair game.
Okay.
Did you steal anything?
No, of course not.
Just checking. Did you like the show?
Yes.
Elaborate.
Well, it's exactly what Alex was saying. It's doing
Yeah.
what it should be doing. It's I don't like saying on brand, but it was on house, let's
Yeah.
say. And it was bang on. It's exciting. I always like on that point on a Saturday evening. I always like the music's quite lifting before we go out. So I just liked it. It's doing what it should be. If you're a big glamorous international bloke from Brazil or somewhere berserk like that with loads of money, what do you want to wear if you want to be super flash? They're doing it. They're laying it down.
That's it. It's super flash. It's that kind of
super flash nouveau, isn't it?
yeah.
Well, let's talk something that was the opposite of super flash, which was ultimate ordinariness. Let's look at Prada. Can we talk a bit, before we start getting too much into this specific collection, but can we talk about this fascination with ordinary that's happening? Because I'm really interested by it. I think it's something that actually came through a lot in Milan, which is interesting what you were saying about Milan having a fashion point of view, because I think you saw it at Fendi, and it's something a lot of people have been talking about in the season that I think was a trend kicked off in Milan. Why do you think it's such a big thing? Why is it so right for Miuccia Prada?
I think after doing very flashy clothes, it feels new. It's that idea of my favourite phrase, which is that fashion is only new next to that which has immediately preceded it. It's, so after she did the collection based on postcards, and after she'd done a collection based on, the kind of the way Weimar Republic men dressed, it's resolutely un-fashion, and in itself that paradoxically becomes fashionable. To be very postmodern. Yeah. And then, but also I think it felt, from a very cynical point of view, Prada are opening 50 new menswear only stores. This felt like it's a very, on the one hand, for a non-fashion man, this doesn't register as fashion. There are clothes that a non-fashion man can wear. On the other hand, for a fashionable man, this is what's on the catwalk, and if you want a catwalk look, you'll buy this. So actually, two birds, one stone. The same look can sell commercially and can
she
sell
owns stitching now,
editorially.
which is interesting. She's always done branding very well, whether it's a print of the season or jewels or gems. And if you see someone with that kind of obvious top stitching now, it's Prada. So it's interesting that
well,
plays, isn't it?
the top stitching, I thought it was interesting because the top stitching is the top stitching they use for the handbags, and then they translated that, and actually on some pieces on the shirts it ended up being like embroidery because it's a very thick thread that's then held in place by loops coming from underneath of much thinner thread, and so it became a form of embellishment, but actually a form of embellishment. It's no longer physically stitching
But as she expanded it and carried on going, and those little motifs kept cropping out. It's quite wearable stuff, but it's obviously her. So that's sort of giving you
well, I think as well there's that massive thing of, I think it is fair to say that Prada kind of owns this. If I wrote something and said that, there isn't a recognisable silhouette, but I think there is a style that's Prada.
Is it about Italian house owning colour? It's interesting what you were just talking about with Versace, and I agree that Versace really does own certain colours, and I really feel that Prada owns certain colours as well, whether it's those unexpected hues that she matches, things like browns, these kind of inkier autumnal tones. Some of them are very distinctively Prada. I feel like often it's that more than cut that makes something feel Prada.
But I kind of feel over the past few seasons that Prada, in a very weird way, has been sort of trying to restate, probably for the last 5 years actually, what Prada represents. In this way that they've been looking back, someone said, I think it might have been like a Tumblr comment or something, somebody said, you know, but she doesn't look back. And I'm like, she looks back constantly. She's constantly pulling out prints from the archive, looking back at what she did in the 90s, this period that really defined Prada as a fashion house rather than just an accessories label.
House.
And I think really over the past 5 years since she did since winter 2010, it's really been about restating and almost laying this kind of legacy of what Prada represents, which is this idea of Chinese whispers 70s via 90s, and this kind of distorted view of kind of 70s normality, you know, based on those wallpaper prints, based on Formica prints, these kind of silhouettes, the top stitching. It's all things that she's explored before, but now it's restating them to really define what Prada represents. And it's almost, don't want to say it, please don't, shuffling off your mortal coil and laying the groundwork for, so Prada's going to carry on when I'm not here, and this is what it represents.
All right.
You know, it's the new look.
What do you think about having loads of women in the show?
I am a big critic of that, and I think it was kind of endemic this fashion week.
Annoying, isn't it?
But also I think she did it last menswear, and now everybody's done it this menswear. It's kind of indicative of the influence that she has. But there were far too many women in menswear shows.
But I feel like she does it in a very different way. When this, I think, was her showing that she has the same idea for men and women. It was showing a concept that could be kind of transferred from a boy to a girl. When it was done on other runways,
I think it was her showing her resort
yeah,
collection.
definitely, of course.
On
In
the
the way it is everyone else.
It was her showing her resort collection on the cheap without having to stage it, and also without having to compromise and do a
But
lookbook.
at least she makes the effort of kind of creating a universal vision, whereas on so many other runways, when there were girls on it, it was just girls in completely different
But we
clothing.
say universal vision, I think also there's this kind of, you know, I think the thing that I never forget is, as much as I love Prada creatively, it's an incredibly successful global fashion house, and there is a commercial noose to creating menswear and womenswear that will sit in the shop at the same time and that looks similar, as opposed to having your shop divided in half and look like two completely different collections jammed together. You know, really this can all be merchandised together very effectively. It's telling a single story. I liked it less in this collection than I did in the last one.
I think that's a less cynically commercial thing. I think that's just she has a vision that she thinks is applicable to a man or a woman. You know, any smart visual merchandiser can make a store work well. I don't think she's designing.
Well, not if it's
Were you at the show, Alex?
different.
Were you at the show? It was the set Rem Koolhaas again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, okay.
It's a swimming pool.
But not if it's two incredibly different things. You can't merchandise two completely. I mean, you couldn't merchandise. They never mixed it. But if Dior decided to, you know, put their shops together, you couldn't have merchandised Eddie Sliman's Dior with John Galliano's Dior.
No, it's very
They're
true.
so different. But with this, I mean, I preferred it in the autumn winter collection because I really felt like that was about that 70s, again 70s, but that 70s 30s thing where there was kind of a gender ambiguity and things were mixed up together. And then I liked that she carried it over into the women's wear as well. And I'd be interested to see if this will carry over into the women's wear, but I don't think it will. But I think she's now established this is the way that she's going to show her resort collection. She's done it. This is the third season that she's done it. So this is just the way that she does it. It makes commercial sense, and it probably makes creative sense as well.
I think, yeah. Have you always liked Prada menswear, Carlo?
Excuse me. Can I have a bit more water, please, guys? Can that happen live? Yeah. I mean, the word I'd use for Prada is this word modernism over a long period of time. And, you know, I remember Prada, my aunts wearing those quilted handbags with those big gold chains, and that's where Prada came from. They all had that. They all had those bags. And particularly when Prada Sport came through really strong in the late 80s to early 90s, and that identity of that red flash. It was funny because we were talking off air and Alex was saying the two shows that really exemplified what was going on in Milan in a particular way, and they couldn't be more different, was Versace and Prada, right?
Camera.
Oh, was it on camera?
I was probably talking about
sorry,
it off
seems
camera
like an
as well.
eternity away already. And funnily enough, David Bradshaw was the stylist that worked very closely with Prada to establish what Prada was, and now he's the stylist that's working with Versace to establish what Versace is. So even though they're at both ends of the spectrum, it's one guy that's working on both those areas. But yeah, like I said, I'm a fan. She established a new standard. I'm a real fan of Fondazione Prada and what she does with art world. I love Rem Koolhaas. I think it was always very, very smart, especially that big New York store that they decided to go and develop together 10 years ago, that big New York store. There's a really great program that was made by an art channel that talks about the Rem Koolhaas Prada collaboration for that first great store, when the store became this conceptual space full of technology to show art and ideas as well as the clothing. So yeah, she hasn't put a foot wrong. This is a little bit far away from what I understand that Prada is. For me, Prada is minimal and modernism, and this is another side to her repertoire, which I know I've seen over the seasons, but for me it's more modernist and a little bit more severe. This is more colour here than I've seen before, especially the browns that are coming through. It's difficult for me, Lou, because I know where these colours come from, being from the same part of the world, and I understand where this comes in and how they can contemporise what they're doing.
It surprised me that you say about colour though, because I think for a lot of people they would associate Prada with bright colours. They would think.
I'm talking about menswear.
Yeah.
So that whole Prada Sport and the lime green interiors that were done in the early 90s was just a lot of nylon jackets for men and very muted pared down black and navy suits. Everything disappeared. It was Prada and it was Helmut Lang. For me, for menswear, the women's wear is something different. I know it's been looked at in a different way, but these more sort of this more retro colour scheme, or what I would call northern Italian colour scheme of mixing camels and browns with particular petrol blue navies, is something that I understand, and it came from that feeling of mohair, these mohair colours that developed in the 50s and 60s, which came through strongly.
It's this sort of 70s palette, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the psyche. It's Gabbana that you'll remember as well. There's reference to that area. It's very particular. It's the 70s colour palette for luxury, actually, as we were talking about luxury earlier. That's what she brings through.
But I feel like that, that was what most of the comment around this show talks about. That it was about what taste was and what was appropriate and what was proper and I guess covetable in the 70s.
Oh, is that what this show was about?
That's how I read it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Most
So we're not
read it.
we're
Is
not
that how
too
you
far
read
off.
it?
No, I thought it was about it being boring. It's about
Or
boring
use that
clothes.
word ordinary.
I feel like the show she did with the gingham and the jumpers, that was her kicking off ordinary, and I feel like this was definitely an extension of that.
Yeah.
But I think it was more about properness.
You know what's really drawing my eye at the moment is just the width of the shoes that they've chosen. I think a lot of menswear brands in the summer, it's summer, and they have these either sandals or open-toed shoes that are really, really wide, and they just always break the silhouette. Not so much in this particular instance, because obviously the silhouette's a little bit roomier and larger. But I was looking at Versace and Armani, some of the others, and they had these open-ended, really super wide flip-flops or sandals. And it seems to be the fallback position for design for spring-summer.
I think it's
Discuss.
I think it's people. Someone weirdly asked me what I hated, and I said sandals. They said why, and I said I think it's a really lazy way of people indicating summer.
So why do so many designers do it?
Because it's the summer season.
Summer.
But it's the summer season, and they're selling not especially summery clothes because now it has to appeal to
All
the
different
southern,
climates.
to the southern hemisphere, whose summer is completely opposite to ours.
Yeah.
So there's a universality to the collections that there never used to be. And so if you stick a sandal on it, it looks summery. If you stick a scarf on it, it looks wintry.
It's sort of just loose handwriting for this is designer, the rest of this look. Because I don't think, only fashion bods buy them really, that on the whole.
What, the
Yeah.
open sandals?
Yeah, the horror ugly things. But what they're really selling is plinth soles and sort of designer trainers, which is just huge. And they're flying out, so they can't put too many on the wrong way.
No, the comment I was making
And
is
that's the other thing is a trainer with a suit. A trainer with a suit.
No, it never worked.
I have one today.
Never worked.
It's just the comment that it's just super wide, and even when there's a narrow silhouette on top, it seems as if the symmetry is somehow distorted. As
Well,
you say,
that's a bit mutual anyway, to do that anyway and break it, sort of make it odd.
Because that's something people often say about how they find problems with the silhouette from the waist down. They say the trousers aren't flatter.
For
and I think
Armani,
for Prada, I think
it's
people,
been said before.
yeah, people often talk about that, and I think that's quite interesting.
Always.
I think there's always something slightly awkward about.
Intentionally.
I think so. I mean, she's clearly not bad at cutting trousers. She's got enough good designers working for her. So I think it's obviously a creative.
Well, I don't think those trousers on the right could be intended to fit anything like the way they're fitting.
What do you mean?
The ones
Because the ones on the right
girl.
fit hideously, but that was the point.
But is that yes,
Yeah,
man's
exactly.
trousers
It's
on
the
girl,
point.
isn't it?
It's the point. Exactly.
yeah,
That's
with
what
the
I'm
man's
saying.
fly
She's
and
not just.
everything.
But what is that point?
It's a little bit porridge, isn't it? Like the prison sitcom, that look there.
Don't use this technical jargon with me.
Right. I think he looks a bit like a young Lenny Godber in those trousers.
Well, it's who mentioned the word ordinary?
Me and Alex.
Ordinary.
Lords.
Okay. It's when you said, because I hadn't seen the show. when you said ordinary, I think that is a correct assessment. But it's a very studied and order interpretation of what the comment ordinary should mean.
That's exactly, I really agree with that, because I think she did ordinary in a modern way. You know, what season was it? Because I've forgotten, you're much better at this. The one where she did like the gingham and the V-neck.
Autumn Winter 13.
Autumn Winter 13. That was about modern ordinary. Like they looked like it was one where Harry Styles opened it. It wasn't actually
I still
Harry Styles,
think
but it
that
looked
wasn't
like him.
particularly ordinary. The shoes weren't especially ordinary, and that gingham ruffle isn't especially ordinary.
No, exactly. There's
know?
always a twist. There's always a perversion, but it was very much modern ordinary. Whereas this is definitely retro.
But no, see,
But the
I
ruffle-
felt that was 50s.
Alex,
like,
the ruffle is safe.
Yeah, very.
Yeah.
That ruched ruffle is another symbol of safety.
But when you try and wear it, it's very difficult
On
to
a
wear.
man.
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not a.
Oh, was there one on a
It's
man?
not a subtle
Yeah.
ruffle. It's a big.
Can we see it? Has it gone past,
ruffle.
guys?
No,
Different
this was from
Oh, another
Autumn
season.
13.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not coming on that.
Never gonna get it all in.
But no, it was a
Concentrate on this
big-
season.
It was a big ruffle, and I
Yeah.
think that, and the whole idea of that being it being skewed, the way that the ruffle was skewed, the way that the sweater was skewed, the way that the shoes were skewed.
No, I'll do.
Yeah.
It was very twisted, and it was a twisted view of, for me, 50s, 60s idea. Whereas this is, and perhaps less Prada, whereas this is much more, I think,
more
in
Prada,
those
yeah.
tropes of 90s Prada.
What's this reference, Alex? Did you know? No, the reference for the stitching, the big overlay stitching, and this. Tom, you mentioned porridge.
I
Reference
think
to
it's
Chris-
quite.
She's done
I
that.
think it's quite
She's
suede
done
head
that
as well.
But I
Yeah,
think
Alex
she
knows
doesn't
off the
tend to
bat.
say
Ah.
what a specific reference is.
Just-
You know, it was
it leads you
the
to
thing she
interpret.
said was Prada Classics
Oh, okay.
with a large C,
Yeah.
which I think is the idea. Where immediately when someone makes a statement like that, you've got to look back at the house and see what
Context.
what actually that
Yeah,
means.
yeah.
What did she intend by saying it's about Prada Classics? And I think even you look at the women's wear, and the women's wear is actually referencing that sincere chic
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that's very honest and very true to Prada.
It's
think
very
it's-
graphic. The sorry, Lou. I just wanted to say just what people think about it. It's very graphic, that overstitch, heavy line. And having worked with the architect Ren Koolhaas with her for many years, I just wondered if that started to play on the subconscious of the design. These ideas of lines and very, very strong lines.
No, I think she's referencing stitching.
But I think what Alex said right at the start when we started talking about Prada is really smart. Because actually, sorry, do you mind just going back to those three that you were on before, where you've got the top stitching next to the T? Oh, sorry, back down, down, down,
Down.
down, that one.
To
Because
the left.
just if you look at those three, I think it goes back to that point that Alex made. It's really smart because you look at the two that we've got there. You can imagine those selling to ordinary blokes who walk into one of these 50 Prada stores that are opening. But that top stitching one, you know, it looks very ordinary. It looks quite boring, as we said on the runway. But actually, you know, if someone's wearing that, it is incredibly striking, as you just said there, Carlo. So it is this idea of being able to buy into a Prada look of ordinary, but that's not ordinary. You're going to stand out if you're wearing that.
And she's dropped the notch quite a lot and got this quite wide 70s thing. So she's made her own version of a 70s lapel and stuff, and she's sort of debuting it with top stitching, but you might actually buy the middle one in teal with the, you know.
It's so period though. I mean, I was having this conversation with Tom the other day about
47 you've got to
actually
that same period, well done.
Yeah, that's really right. What did I get to? 47 minutes without mentioning the word period.
Good chat.
I just made this comment because obviously I'm designing menswear again, bespoke menswear again. That for the last 100, 150
Can't
years.
polish teal though, can you, in chocolate?
No, absolutely not. There have only been really three lapel shapes for a man, which was a notch, a peak, and a shawl, that have been accepted widely, and that's kind of it. And designers have only really started to play with dimension of the size of the lapel, and that's it.
I saw a bit of action in the 80s. You know,
You did, but
Fujiwara,
nothing stuck.
Compagnon della Pelle.
Yeah,
you
but
know,
nothing stuck.
Acid
long
House came
term.
and
Yeah.
stopped lapels altogether.
Agreed. And I remember Fujiwara. I remember meeting Giuliano Fujiwara and, you know, admiring what was going on. But it didn't hold. People have just gone back to the peak, back to the notch, and back to the shawl for evening. And it's as if somehow, and I was discussing this with Tom the other day, as if I'm walking around looking at all these collections that are slightly too period. It's 2014 and things should be maybe a little bit more contemporary.
But what would you see as a contemporary colour then?
Well, I've just started to experiment with them.
He's got one on, look.
Got one on.
Here's one you made earlier.
Here's one I made earlier.
Whereas you're looking very outdated with your peaks.
I am really outdated. I've come period.
No, they're a standard classic, and you should have that. But I think there should be some contemporary experimentation or proposition.
What's this one
now
called?
as well.
Let's just get it out. You know, talk about that one yet, or is it still a secret even though you're wearing it?
None of it's a secret.
Right.
None of it's a secret. This is a take on a contemporary peak, but without the notch detail. Just everything is sewn into one seamless jacket where the line follows the eye. But as we flick through Bottega, Prada, Versace, what else have we looked at today?
That's it so far.
Armani.
Okay.
We've
And
only
Armani.
got 28 more to go.
Yeah. Whereas Armani did try, and correct me if I'm wrong, he did experiment with what is known as the Nehru collar for many seasons and shirtless collars. And that again became a standard. What was it known as in this country, Alex? There's something collar without a button at the top.
Mandarin?
No, the sort of the familiar wording that was used for it.
I always use Nehru.
A grandad collar,
That's
wasn't
for a
that?
shirt.
something?
Grandad's a shirt.
Oh, grandad's a
shirt,
shirt.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a detachable collar. That references a detachable collar for
Yeah.
Then I feel like that is incredibly dated.
Yeah,
That takes you to, it's 1990.
yeah, completely. Well,
But the Nero.
No, it's not.
1990 is not that dated.
But no, it's like, it's
Oh, it takes
25
you-
years ago.
Oh Christ, it isn't.
It's
You're right, that is dated.
No, but it's very specifically that. It's, it's Romeo Gigli, it's
such
Dolce
a
&
fashion
Gabbana's
comment,
first
isn't
menswear
it? It's
thing.
25 years ago.
25 years ago.
Forget the other 250 years.
Talking about
It's
collars
that.
and
That's a bit
tailoring
like
and subtle innovation, let's talk about Zegna. Because I was interested to see what's happening there as a whole. It's obviously an interesting time because in Pitti, which I know it's still in Italy, we're not meant to be talking about, but we should perhaps. We've seen the merge of Zegna with Zegna Sport, which was really interesting as well. So it's obviously an interesting time for the house as a whole. What do we think of what Stefano Pilati is doing? Because this is his second season. Tom, we'll go to
What's
you
his
first.
third?
His first? No,
Third.
second.
It's his third.
It's his third.
Yeah.
Shit, sorry.
Wait, I mean, he's got the scale behind him, and within that, he's doing all sorts, and lots of it is good. I mean, he's satisfying everyone as
Yeah.
well, isn't he? Because he's
Satisfying himself. I think that's, for me,
Which is-
was important.
That's on his contract. But
Did you both see the show? Did
Yeah.
you both go to the show?
Yeah, and it's got lots
You
of good
go,
stuff
Luke.
in
Sorry.
it. Clever stuff, but also it's double looks. He's got like 6 looks. I mean, he's just got looks based on what's that mill they bought? Not mill, the label that just does Vicuna and stuff. The women's wear.
Loreno Piane?
No.
It's,
And he's using that for whole bits of it. And it's got-
Agnona.
it's just it's sort of consummate luxury and cutting edge fashion. He's got it all in there. Tailoring took a little bit of time to get used to it, but because he subverts it a bit too much. But it's their couture line, so he can get away with what he's doing there and simplify it a bit for the rest. So I think it's pretty good. And right at the end, he did some stuff that I think he quite fancies doing, was using those 70s luxury colours, even though it seems.
That kind of trio of suits with
Quite
everything
like
broken
that.
up into
Yeah, I
the
like
broken
that.
suits.
Thought that was good. And then what did you think of Zegna when you saw it in Florence?
I liked it a lot. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was much better to see it up close, though. I felt like the presentation let it down a bit because I was interested purely by the technical elements that they'd used there. So you won't find Zegna because it was in Pitti.
But
don't
he
worry for it.
doesn't do
No, he
Zegna.
doesn't do it. It's
Yeah.
what are
Sorry.
both their names?
Sturridge.
Yeah, Paul
Sturridge.
Sturridge and I can't remember the other one. So they've basically, the guy that used to do Zegna Sport and the guy that used to do Zegna come together and now working on Zegna together.
I don't remember those bits. That's quite period, those. No.
Well, again, it's a notch and it's a peak in every single shot, nearly always. Is there a collar turned up at the top or the back? The image on the right hand side, is that a turned up collar?
That's
No,
inside
it's
his
like a
jacket.
neck
It's a
cheek.
cardigan on the inside.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
But he
you're
fancies
right.
himself as a moderniser. He modernised the suit and he's done stuff with the lapel and things like that. You should have a chat with him, see how you swap notes.
People often talk that he's doing something that feels much more feminine. Do you guys agree with that?
Well, didn't he introduce a few seasons ago, Alex, and I might be misremembering this, the third sex? He was talking about a third genre. It was Tim Blanks I was discussing it with. It was a third genre, so there was man and there was woman, and he was trying to introduce a third, it was proposing some kind of third genre, and the concept of the show was loosely based on this with the tailoring. Maybe 5 or 6 years, could have been. It wasn't here. It was it wasn't here. It was many years ago. It was that
Saint
designer.
The
Yeah.
Hermaphrodite Cruise collection.
Oh.
I remember it.
Oh, you do. Okay. Yeah. What was the question, Lou?
I was asking if we feel like it feels more feminine.
Oh, I see. It's definitely, there's some oversized going on there, isn't there?
He loves a big drapey bit
Yeah.
of outerwear
But
that
I think
flows.
there's that- I think
so I
there's
wouldn't say it's
that-
necessarily feminine, more dramatic. It's like
Yeah.
that bowling in and doing a bit
But I
of
think
this.
also there are these certain elements that you associate more readily with women's wear than with men's wear, and Carlo will shout at me when I say this, but I think that you associate a drape more readily with women's than with men's. And I know there's a
Not
drape
in
suit
bespoke.
and there's a large, but
Yeah.
I think when people talk about, if someone was to say, oh, this is draped, you think of a draped dress. You wouldn't immediately think of a draped trouser or a draped jacket for a man. because I think people have very static ideas of what these kind of words represent. Whereas I think that he's trying to bring in not so much femininity, I would say, but there's a certain fluidity that he's bringing to this, which certainly contrasted, again, that idea of something appearing new in contrast to that which has immediately preceded it. In contrast to old Zegna, that feels incredibly new. I think to see somebody dealing with Zegna in this way feels very different. The other thing that I really love about Zegna, and I'm a big, big fan, I hated the presentation last season, but I actually really like the clothes, is this idea that he's brought a hell of a lot of what he did at Saint Laurent into Zegna. And some people have an issue with that, and they feel like he's, he's kind of a one-trick pony, but I really feel like it's how he feels that men should dress. And I always felt like his menswear got really overshadowed at Saint Laurent, and coming across and doing it now and it being the focus, you can really see how strong it is and what he's doing that's different and what feels different. And it does feel like he's experimenting, and probably experimenting in Zegna is quite a difficult thing. It's it's one of the world's biggest manufacturers of men's tailoring.
You obviously feel there is a feminine thread.
No, I think there's a fluidity. I think that's the best word, which is a word that Alex just used.
But also I feel like this one isn't a particularly feminine collection.
No, I agree.
There have been ones that have. I think the last one, which had much more draping, and much more kind of softer use of fabric, felt perhaps more feminine. I think the first one felt quite feminine.
I felt like this one felt more sort of luxurious.
We say that just as an enormous pair of pink trousers come up, which,
But this was my favourite bit, these kind of, like, really opulent colours. I think there's something quite... I think it's interesting that you said the word dramatic, Tom, because I think that actually feels quite right for it. There's that kind of sense of poise and theatre in a more subtle way, but I think it's interesting.
And you wouldn't have thought Zegna re-offering that up, would you, like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
No.
But what does it mean? Sorry, go.
If you look far enough back in the Zegna archive, 50s, 60s, 70s, I'm just wondering if those colours... Is there a new one?
There's a new lapel. It's 4 now.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've got 3 new ones as well.
Right, 7.
I just wondered again if he'd obviously, and I agree, there is this, in certain designers, there's this, let's call it sensitivity to how they do the work, and that can be misconstrued as, well, that's the wrong word, it can be interpreted as being slightly feminine. I think he does do that through the collection. I just wondered if he'd reference some of this colour palette from the archive, because these, again, very strong Italian 70s, 60s colours.
I think it's very Saint Laurent. The use of colour is very Saint Laurent, and actually I think...
So he's brought that over.
Well, I think the idea of him being at Saint Laurent and then moving somewhere and not taking that sensibility, he was, immersed in the Saint Laurent archives.
He's still finishing.
Nearly a decade.
Yeah.
But also I think it's... But I think as well, it's, you're really sort of dumb if you come from Saint Laurent and don't bring some of it with you. If you've been in the archives of one of the greatest designers ever.
Zegna would argue they've got a good archive.
Yeah, but they're not one of the greatest fashion designers ever. They make really great suits. And I think now what they do is they make really great suits, and they have a really great fashion designer helping them to make those suits feel fresh and different and innovative, and maybe point them, in the way that they can move.
And they've got their own mill, which is what we talked about earlier on. They've got their own big mill.
Own mills, enormous markets. And he kind of has, like you said, it's, they're very insistent on marketing this as the couture line, which I think gives... First of all, there is a bit of femininity to the name, but also, this idea of it being a laboratory of ideas, this idea of it being a place where you can experiment, and it doesn't immediately have to boil down to what's hanging in a shop. And it's really hideously expensive.
We were talking about what you liked earlier about brands when they actually do themselves, and you see that through there. Does that look like Zegna from what you know?
It looks like Stefano Pilati, and that's what I want. I want a collection that looks like the designer.
Okay.
Because what a waste to take a great fashion designer, bring them into a house known for tailoring, and then not use them.
Agreed, but I also think that good designers should reinvent traditional houses and offer something contemporary.
But I don't feel like I know what Zegna was.
Okay.
I don't think it operated on a fashion level. It operated on a tailoring level and on a product level.
Okay.
That certain way. But it's not like... And actually, I think he's much more comfortable at Zegna than he was at Saint Laurent, because I think at Saint Laurent you've got this legacy that's weighing you down. And he used to put out collections at Saint Laurent that were either kind of timid and really trying to pay homage to the legacy, or that were massive fuck yous. My favourite collection was his massive fuck you, which was, you know, covered in leather strawberries for women. Although I could feasibly have worn it. I think it was spring 2010 was the leather strawberry collection, and leather lederhosen and dresses made out of curtains. Like, it was the biggest fuck you.
I just remembered I'm on a
possible.
fashion panel again. What do you think Zegna is about over the last 15, 20 years? What is Zegna identity? Can you put them all into that group? I'm not going to put words in your mouth.
But who all?
No, brands like Zegna over the last 15 or 20 years.
Zegna's Italian luxury, you know, it's modern suiting as well. It's not retro. They like the idea of super light stuff. They like the idea of modern.
Through fabric technology,
yeah,
which they're always very big on.
Modern luxury men's tailoring.
Tailoring, okay.
But I think as well, that for me, that onus was on textile and was on textile innovation, and less so much on design.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, here's a really great fabric that
So
we're
they're
making
winning.
into a two-piece
That's
suit.
a massive story in menswear. That we've not even talked about really. I don't think we have enough time, but it is the big story. Is that so they're winning on that as well. They're doing some great techno merino.
Tech merino.
Is super good stuff.
That's what I mean. That was the most interesting thing I thought about that Pitti presentation of the new Zegna is those fabric innovations and the way that they're being used, not just kind of tacked on, but
Suits you can run to work in and not sweat.
But I don't think that's a new idea as such. I think it's just they're doing it in a
It's
more.
not just knew it wouldn't work either.
But then also, I think if a man's buying a Zegna suit, is he really going to run to work? Probably not. Like, there's some of that where you're like, it's just a really great tagline, like, oh, you can fill this with water, and it's not going to leak if you fill your pockets with water. So what? I'm not filling my pockets with water. I don't care. Like, stop trying, you know, design new clothes. I don't want some fabric that's new in a t-shirt. I want new clothes. I want things that look innovative and interesting, and that's someone that's really trying to move it on. And that's why I like Stefano Pilati. He's trying to move it on. He's trying to do, and sometimes he fails. I think he kind of failed last season when he pointed the chairs away from the clothes. That was really stupid. But he's learning and he's trying, and you know, there's something fantastic about that. I like to see a designer that isn't afraid to make a mistake, and a designer who is genuinely trying to create something different. You know, it's sort of what it should all be about.
Especially if you're going to call it couture and get a fashion designer in there.
Well, I think with his legacy, it's kind of, it's, you know, these are the clothes that I want to see him do. I'm a massive fan
he's
of
amazing.
what he did at Saint Laurent. I was a fan all the way through. I kind of feel like, you know, and the other thing I think that's great here is it's really showing off what he can do for men, which he didn't really get a chance to at Saint Laurent.
Can we talk about Fendi, because we should have maybe jumped to it after Prada, because I think Fendi was a kind of a slightly odd collection in some ways.
There's white sandals again.
But it was really
One of them
like
fell off.
they talked a lot about this idea.
It fell off one of the models.
Who did that?
That's why I hate these kind of shoes.
Well, you encapsulated the phrase. It's just a little bit lazy, isn't it?
But they talked so openly about ordinary. They were like, this is, you know, your average bloke going to work, being in the city. It was all just about.
At Fendi as well, Lou.
At Fendi, yeah, which was, and given last season there was like, you know, big fur runway and stuff, it was quite a departure. And I think I found it quite a confusing collection.
I just think that it didn't really work for me, ideas wise. You know, there was denim that was printed, there was leather that was printed to look like denim. It didn't look like denim, it just sort of looked ugly. There was lots of stuff that was unintentionally ugly. I like ugly clothes, but if they're supposed to be ugly, and these weren't supposed to be ugly, they just were. You know, I like Prada. It's intentionally ugly. It's intentionally boring. It's done with a certain purpose. This felt a little bit purposeless to me.
Yeah.
And also, I guess it's that very difficult thing of what does a fair house do for summer?
Yeah. But also it goes back to what we were saying about what do you go to Fendi for, and perhaps you're right, you know, you would go to Prada for something ugly or for something ordinary, but something that was deliberately ugly or ordinary, but you probably don't want to walk into Fendi and get something that looks like mouldy denim.
You know, I think this jacket on the left here that was really good. It's woven, you know, it took something like 17 years to make or something. There's
He's
work
feisty today, isn't he?
and that's ultimately that's what you go to Fendi for. You want work.
Exactly.
You want worked
Craft.
clothes. It's not easy. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
So why you said something?
And I want craft with skin as well, which is, I think it's interesting to see the amount of leather they're using, which is kind of, I guess, not as sweltering as fur to wear.
Well, yeah, you said something very interesting. So what actually does a fur house do in the spring summer season?
What do they do?
Well, obviously they do this.
What would you like to see them do though?
I think it's a contradiction in terms, you say, okay, it's obviously that doesn't happen. In Italy, people buy fur in summer as well. They buy it for winter. So there is, very near me, there was a shop in Salsa Maggiore, which has been there forever. And Salsa Maggiore was this old spa town. And you get all these old women buying the same old furs or different coloured furs for years and years and years. It's been there forever. And I remember some of my earliest memories of going there in August. It'd be sweltering hot outside and there'd be these women buying their furs for winter. So they shop for fur in winter to wear in winter, and in winter they shop for new furs because it's the nature of the luxurious product. If you can buy that, you can spend it all year round. It's just a purchase, just a comment on the consumer way and how this has come about. What I'd like to see, I think that would be a challenge for menswear, but as Alex said, you'd have to look at skins, superfine skins. You can do things perforated now, which will work very, very well. Perforated leather, perforated suedes, always works.
Not keen.
Well,
Seems a bit pointless.
Well, whether you're keen or not,
Yeah.
what do you do as a fur house for spring, summer?
Yeah.
Young Tom.
Did you like it, Tom? Did you go to
Not
the
really.
show?
I went. Yeah, I mean, it made more sense than the autumn winter one, but still, I don't particularly understand what they're up to. And I always think about. I imagine quite a couple of old couple who remember Fendi and bowling in somewhere and going, let's pop in. I used to wear that back in the day, and just being nothing for them. I mean, maybe this commercial collection is actually quite different, but I think it should be a little bit more vecchio mondo.
Old
flash.
world.
Yes.
Was there any description that came with the show about what they were doing?
They just talked about, city living, ordinary man, going to work, making his journey, being in his own world.
A lot about some headphones.
That was what the headphones were,
Okay.
this idea of
So
commuting.
now it's getting
Is
quite
this the
bad. I might
denim you were
switched
talking
off then.
about?
Yes.
Yeah, but that's obviously a reference to sun-bleached denim, which back from the 40s, 50s, and with Levi's was an important development. Well, it wasn't a development; it just happened with your denim. If you wore it long enough, it was sun-bleached. But obviously, they tried to take it somewhere new there, haven't they? Was it actually denim? Did you
No,
see
it's
the clothes?
leather.
No, it's leather printed to look like denim.
I see.
Yeah, that's the unpleasant aspect of
It's
it.
leather printed to look like denim.
Which I guess is that idea of trying to play with skins. But the thing that I found interesting is they've just opened their first menswear department outside of Rome, and they've opened it here,
Yeah.
which was interesting. And Sylvia Fendi was saying, there's this kind of tradition of the English dandy, and our menswear's always done quite well here. Which
There is
I don't
this
think it's
tradition.
particularly to English people. I actually think it's to a lot of tourists.
Yeah,
It's very, I went to a Tom Ford thing, and he said he'd done fur coats for men, and they sold out in Russia, so he did 4 more in the next collection because it sells very well in certain markets. Astrid Anderson, there are people. It is, and I guess it kind of taps into that. I don't really want to see this from Fendi. What I would like to see, and I actually really loved the last season collection. I took a late flight so I could see this because I wanted something in your face and a little bit offensive. I kind of wanted it to be, I sort of feel like that's what Fendi should be. You should go and you should see nothing that isn't fur. It should be fur knickers, everything, every layer, nothing but fur. Treated in an inventive way, done in, and I feel like it didn't deliver what I wanted from a Fendi menswear collection.
But difficult for spring, summer, given the brief
But I
and the
kind of
remit and
think a
what they have to
Fendi man
work.
is the man that would probably wear, I'd like him to be the man that would wear a fur G-string. I said G-string twice.
And also, as we've already established, just put some sandals on it and then it'll be spring, summer. So it'll be
Well,
totally
they
fine.
could have experimented. I don't know. Maybe they have been. I mean, who am I to say? But you can get very, very fine leathers, which they refer to as spring and summer leather.
Yeah.
I've just done a tie in suede, which is very, very thin, and we split the hide, so it got down to whatever microns, I can't remember. So maybe some experimentation in that area, if they can, because again, in the evening when it cools down, especially in Italy, or if you're by the beach, it gets a little bit windy. Young Italians do wear leather and suede in the evening.
Well, I feel
in
that
summer.
suede kind of like a short-sleeved suede kind of shirt jacket is very kind of Italian.
Yeah, an open.
Yeah.
I always think of it as
Yeah,
that kind
no,
of,
agreed.
like kind of a weird
Agreed.
Saint Laurent 60s, 70s safari thing in
Yeah.
suede. Actually, Stefano Pilati had it in his first Zegna collection,
yeah.
which I didn't like that in the Zegna collection. But I think there are certain ideas of wearing leather and skin for summer. So it isn't automatically.
It can work.
Yeah.
Did they put it through on the accessories? Obviously bags, because that's their industry.
Yeah, you can see lots of and there were the little
Did it work on the bag? Did you guys like the accessories?
The accessories work really well, don't they? The Salieri bag, that's the thing in London that's looking really good. And
Salieri?
Yeah.
Is that a reference to something? I don't know.
It's their saddling, it's their classic bag. They started doing that.
What do they call it, Salieri?
After the saddle makers.
All right.
I like the fur backpack.
They're good. Do you like that one, do you?
Yeah.
Oh.
For me, not for...
Yeah.
No, I like the backpacks. I like the little, furry gewgaws they had hanging on things.
They had furry light bulbs.
But even
wearing,
but even wearing fur, you see, even having a fur rucksack in summer, you just don't want any clothes on you at all.
Yeah.
There is a juxtaposition between the season and what they're doing. So it's obviously, admittedly, very difficult. How many seasons have these guys done menswear for?
They revived it. This is the third that they've been formally presenting it. But it's kind of ramped up. I think the first one was kind of there were a few. First one was standing. Second one, there were some benches you could sit on, and this season was formalised seating.
No, last season was a catwalk as well.
Yeah, but it was benches. It wasn't assigned seating. Whereas this time it was assigned seating. Which I think is that whole idea. First of all, the increasing importance of menswear, and also the increasing formalisation of them gently easing their way onto the schedule.
They've done four.
Why don't they? Does the menswear sell? Is it part of the business, or is it just about the bags?
Because they did that big Yeti one, where it was a presentation.
Oh yeah,
and then they did,
Sorry.
No,
I
just never remember stuff like this.
Okay,
So I'm like really proud that I just...
If this is about Fendi being recognised as a bag manufacturer, then why don't some of these brands do something conceptual as a presentation? Maybe not show too many clothing, but break down the components of the leather in their industry and show something that's a little bit more.
But I think now people increasingly want to. It's not just about the bags anymore.
So they need to show that.
They want to build a menswear. And really, this is a very commercial menswear. Commercial menswear collection.
Or just trim everything. Just trim everything with suede and leather would be a simplistic way to do it.
The same way that kind of Tod's did something this season. That was, again, that's trying to move it beyond just the driving shoe into have a fashion identity.
He's launched his own collection, hasn't he? So
Who's that, Tom?
Della Valle's got his own. It's not a capsule. It's a bit bigger, isn't it? Sort of 16.
What's
looks.
it called? Della Valle
menswear. No, it's just called. I think it's not called Sartoria. I think it's just. It's they're ready to wear.
Oh, okay.
And next season, because they said this time it was going to be catwalk, and I think next season it's going to be catwalk. They've just appointed somebody whose name I can't remember.
It's his ideas. About he didn't design it, but it's his ideas about clothing. It's full 16. Maybe it's 16 pieces into different looks. It's quite good.
Okay.
Let's talk about Dolce.
Right.
Alex or Tom, what did you think?
Well, it's not difficult to decide what the influences are there.
No.
It was sort of comedy and cringy, really.
Yeah.
They were the two things that would, considering what they are capable of. The shows have just got berserk in recent years, and they're sort of quite laughable. You end up writing something. I mean, it was berserk, bolero, Matador stuff. And then tell you what they did do. They picked up on a polka dot, which is you're a big fan of a polka dot, aren't you, Carlo?
Well, I did it a long time ago.
But anyway, they went berserk with the polka dot. Till the end, it was just all polka dots in red and black.
And on this very, the thing that I saw a lot of places is this slender trouser cropped with a bare ankle.
Right,
which
is a thing.
Was kind of the thing that everyone decided. Some season they decided to do shorts. Some season everyone decides to do a big coat. And this season it was slender trousers, slightly cropped, bare ankle, which is a very Italian way, but you saw it in a lot of different places.
Yeah, that original reference to the very short, narrow, as actually very similar to what Tom's wearing today.
Well, to be honest, if they'd ridden up, they ride up badly, these ones.
It's to show off the shoe. I mean, that's pure. That's. I remember my father doing it, my grandfather doing it. He said, and I remember my relatives telling me that's how to do it. It's to show off the shoe. And also, it's this, and I don't know if we answered the question earlier, Lou, when you talked about sexiness in menswear and stuff like that. It's also to show the permissible part of a man's body where you can show a little bit of flesh. Going back from 50s, 60s and 70s, obviously today everything has changed. But you were allowed to not wear a sock and show off the shoe and show a little bit of flesh. That was okay in certain circles. What's that look on the left?
What indeed? Good question.
Have you met them, Alex?
It's quite alternate, isn't it?
No, I've not.
You haven't interviewed. Have you, Lou?
No, I haven't. We used to have problems with them because they used to have problems with you, didn't they? So
We might have problems again.
Have you done them? Have you interviewed them?
Oh, no, I've had a chat with Domenico. He's a nice chap.
Is he the one that's
He's
got
the
less
bald-
hair?
He's the bald one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And he's a very affable fella.
I was on a table with them at a dinner at a GQ thing once, but I couldn't hear much of what was going on.
I love going to the shows because there's something very theatrical and fun about it. It's very cheerful, but it's incredibly costumey, you know, and you do kind of walk away feeling like, oh, I was entertained. But
Do they have a theatrical background, those two?
Well, they are. You know, they're Italian.
I mean, they bought. It's an old cinema. The
Stefano is
Metropole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think the fact
Armani
they're
used to
showing
have
in an
that.
old cinema.
Armani used to have that though, back
So
in
there
the
must be
day.
something there. Fellini's obviously in
They're
there.
not, never on the schedule as well. I always forget that.
Yeah.
They're never on the schedule, which is interesting. It's
Yeah.
like, we're just doing it separately in the middle of Fashion Week.
Yeah.
Like, what happened there? I'd like someone to expose what.
Yeah, what did happen there?
Something
They had an
awful.
argument, I think.
Massive
and
falling
then-
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, you just talked about the trousers, which is a good way of skirting, pardon the pun, around the issue. What did you think of the collection as a whole?
Guru Josh Matador.
I mean, it's a difficult one because on the one hand, and to be sort of generous, I think the sportswear stuff has a certain place. It has a certain customer. I can immediately see who's going to wear that. It appeals to the people that wear, you know, the very embellished stuff by Givenchy.
Yeah.
It's a certain type of menswear that's been emerging over the past few years, which again slots into that Astrid Anderson thing.
Yeah, so
I
like the
think-
middle that we're seeing.
Yeah,
is a good
and
example.
also the tailoring when it isn't messed up is interesting, and it is interesting to see them try and do something new with tailoring, which is this idea of introducing that kind of scooped waistcoat, which is retro, but also I feel references to kind of, you know, bullfighting and the whole Spanish theme.
Yeah.
It's just a pity the rest of it looked like Strictly Ballroom. That's the issue. Like, you know, who realistically wants to look like a mariachi band leader in a brocade bolero? And I love a brocade, and I love a bolero. So I should be the
It's too
target
much for me
market.
today, Alex.
Really? No, but
You are
it's
the
kind of-
demographic for sure.
I mean, it's very sort of La Croix in that La Croix 80s, you know,
Yeah.
bullfighting.
I mean,
you
if
know,
anyone's going to
north
love it,
of-
you are. Yeah.
North of Spain, south of France, and that's why the fact that I didn't, and for me, I was like, you know, it looked kind of costumey, but I thought the most costumey thing was were the red suits at the end. Those were the ones, shiny red suits, and I was just like, who would ever wear these?
Well, I mean, they could have done themselves a bit of a favour as well, because like you're doing sort of frogging and brocade, they could have just done like, you know, reined it in a little bit as opposed to going completely mental with it and just covering outfits with it and stuff like that. Yeah, they could have done. They're still selling three-piece evening wear with sort of, you know, double shawl collar and, you know, a bit of bullfighter stuff going on. But they went berserk with it and didn't hold back. They could have done themselves a favour there. You're going to show the polka dot endings. That was
Can
the
we
thing.
go back to the end? I'm conscious. Oh, here we go. We're getting to all the polka dots.
Do we need to do another one?
I'm conscious of time, so I feel like it's unconscious to you have to run. Very subtly communicated there.
So that's the end of today's panel. Thank you very
No,
much.
I'm conscious. Have I missed anyone? Is there anyone?
Loads of people. Go to have another one. There's dozens of people.
I know
we've
there are
missed.
lots.
I think you've covered all the important
But
ones.
was there
haven't
any
you?
highlights? Was there any surprise hits?
Dag
Anyone-
nabbit.
Tom's got notes in his book. Why don't you just read the headings of all
know.
six?
Well, I mean, I think we need to have a regroup. Maybe we should do one on the presentations in Milan, which is where a lot of the action is actually going on. You see,
Yeah.
a new sort of small drama is presented in these presentations, which I don't think we can talk about today.
I think it was summed up at the beginning, Lou. We talked about business, we talked about a particular type of look that you expect from Milan, and the brand's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Good way. We'll agree. Sad that we had to end on Dolce, but these things happen. So onwards and upwards. Thanks, gang.
Thanks a lot.